Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm very, very happy to have you over. And I feel a little stupid, actually, because I've been hearing a lot of people and a lot of conversations around me, and I've been a part of some of them, where people are talking about this chat GPT. Is that right? I don't know. I didn't even know. The problem is, a lot of the times I hear it and it's actually not what it is, because I thought it's GPT. And frankly, yeah, I know what it does. And there are a lot of conversations about how it's being banned on university campuses because of people using it, and how people are going to kind of use AI to kind of fudge papers and things. But frankly, when I've read a couple of articles or tweets about how you can actually use it to kind of aid you in whether it's essay writing, whether it's writing descriptions, whether it's writing summaries, or even in some cases screenplays or books or whatever it may be. It states it as being as simple as ask it a question and it'll kind of look within its huge archives and give you an answer that it thinks is suitable to your question. But I was just literally before recording this, I was just like, okay, what will I ask it, right? Maybe I can ask it to write a description for this episode. And I realized I was a little stumped. I didn't know how to go about it, so I felt a little silly that I might not be able to use this AI thing. But I haven't tried it. Have you tried it? I heard it's quite fantastic. In fact, I was talking to a friend on the phone the other day, and he was like, wait a second, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to write me a job description. And he fed in some, I think, some relevant pointers about the role, about the nature of the work, or whatever it may be, maybe a line or two. And then he read out the thing it gave, and it was quite fucking fantastic. Like everything from the title to the description to the responsibilities to, pretty much what you would spend a day on, depending on how kind of involved you are in that particular task and how important it is. But I think that's what is interesting, right? Because we get so caught up. See, unless, of course, you're an author who takes pride in the words and also the construct of stories with the right amount of their own style, with the amount of kind of time they put into the choice of words, the grammar, and so, like P.G. Woodhouse, who I love listening to. I think he has a very unique style, and so does a lot of. I mean, every author aspires to have their own unique style of storytelling, and that comes with a lot of the choice of words, the way those words are put together. And if that's kind of your key offering, besides, of course, the idea and the story, then, of course, you need to really sort of spend time on that craft. And that's the same for a comedian, or that's the same for a dialogue kind of writer, or someone whose entire flair for the language is what makes them special and what sets them apart, right? Even, say, music, lyric writers, etc. But I remember being in college, and I remember the importance of the research papers or the essays. And that, I don't know if it's that important, because unless, of course, you're in creative writing, I think for science papers or even for social science papers, how important is it to write like good creative sentences? Let's put it that way. The idea is your findings and your opinion, or more importantly, your kind of stand on what you're trying to put in your paper. And in that case, I think this is superb, right? Like, why would you waste time on the tedious aspect of writing when this can do the writing for you? But you can spend more time, 90% of the time, on actually thinking about the problem, or the solution to the problem, or the idea behind what interests you. Or I mean, what I think I'm getting at is, it's something that can be really used if we kind of look at it the right way, and not just as a a trick that you can kind of think. But I'm sure a lot of people have already cracked it in the way that they want to. But I feel a lot of the writing tasks that we are sort of expected to do and that we've kind of got used to considering as work is pretty mundane, it's pretty dull, it's pretty unnecessary. Like, for instance, even if you're like, I remember being in corporate and 90% of the work was shit, man, like minutes of the meeting or some other junk like that where you have to write emails and sort of copy everyone on it, or you have to write these technical papers. And trust me, the technical papers I used to review were so badly written, like the grammar, the English they use, the kind of sentences were just junk. And I feel when that's not your strength, or that's not even your responsibility, and the responsibility of your role in that blue paper, whatever white paper it is the engineering behind it, or the code, or the design language, and that's something that's your strength. So for those situations where you don't necessarily have the skills, or it's not even something that is expected of you, because if you look in companies now, they say these things, right? Soft skills. And most people, let's be honest, don't have fucking soft skills at all. Like the way when they speak, the way they write, the way they communicate, while they say, yeah, that's one of my core strengths, and that's how my strategy, and all these kind of fancy fucking resume language, I really don't think any of them give it importance. I mean, the main idea is to cover their asses, copy their bosses, and make sure that they appear to be doing work. But I really think that in situations like that, or even situations where you have to do like, things which aren't sort of the most where the writing skill or the language or the, as I already mentioned, fucking, I know I'm repeating myself, but where the thing kind of represents who you are, when the writing or the style of writing or the choice of words really matter to you, I think in other situations, fucking go ahead, use ChatGPT, because it does a really good job, I feel, of just standardizing stuff that is mediocre at the present moment, right? I think it'll people who are really keen, people who are really talented, people who are really creative, people who are really keen on bringing out their style to the forefront will continue to do that, and they won't use things like ChatGPT because they feel it does an injustice to their skill or their way of presenting what they want to say. But for every other situation where writing is just more to fill up, is more of a task that just, or rather just a medium to communicate something bigger. And I know writing is always the case. I mean, with anything, right? Like, see, with talking as well, with speaking, and with the art forms, with music, with stand-up, with poetry. See, like that kind of place, it's as much as the idea and the words. It's as much the premise and the words, and it's how it's said, etc. But for instance, researchers, or for instance, you have people who are, I would say even bloggers would probably fall into the writers category, storytelling category. But for everyone else, unless you have this scientist who's really proud of her way of writing, and many times it's just read by other scientists, and they don't care about whether it's a beautifully constructed sentence or whether it's a deeper, more profound way of understanding the thing. It's more fact-based. You present your findings and you present your thesis or your hypothesis. And for those situations, and even in places where it's even worse, when the communication is kind of so filled with abbreviations and with all these shortened things in emojis, I think this particular tool, I think, will really do a good job in raising the standard of communication and reducing the time spent on that communication, because you just kind of say, what's the best way I can write an email to my boss, introducing this idea I have for a project, or this idea I have for expanding the team, or these kind of very standardized corporate kind of situations and requirements, which can be done. And then you can get to the real good shit if you're really keen on doing good shit. Because I feel a lot of people in corporate, the world over, I think, not just in IT or in anything, but across the board, again, not everyone, but there are a lot of people, I think, who hide behind the shit work. And I think a few people, as I told you last time as well, do all the good work, and the bigger number take credit for that. And I feel this can kind of really avoid that, and I think give importance to really what needs to be done. And you don't waste hours on kind of sharing minutes of the meeting, or you kind of don't kind of hide behind numbers, and you don't hide behind your kind of foosball cigarette breaks and these long chains of emails and kind of all these things you do on Word to kind of just make one change and just kind of appear like you've done a lot of work. So I think that may be good, but also, yeah, I think for students, fucking go ahead, man. What's the problem? Like, I think as long as the idea is original, I think the way you write it, of course, if, I'm not a professor, I'm not an academician. I don't know what the fucking word is. I think it's go ahead. I feel it's going to change the way we prioritize and give importance to what is actually important, and I think that's good. So yeah, hats off to the OpenAI, the folks at OpenAI, and fuck it, it's a step, and it's a step in the right direction. I think that's good, and that's my 2 cents. And all of that was said by me, not by ChatGPT. Clearly, you can tell. Anyway, let me introduce my guest on today's episode, because she is someone I had a really interesting conversation with, and it was a topic that kind of has to be approached a little delicately, because all of us at some point or at repeating points in our life, we think about this topic, and that's the idea of death and losing someone dear to us. And we think of our own mortality, and many of us are scared of dying. And I think the whole of humanity as a collective is driven by the fear of dying. And a lot of people make an effort to not think about it. And in the process, they kind of say, I'm living, but it's always on the back of their mind. But if you look at everything from spiritual texts, where they talk about the idea of the only thing being guaranteed is death, and how you must, once you make peace with it, that's when you actually sort of realize that life in its truest self is something to live for now and not worry about what might happen down the line. So Kelley Lynn, that's my guest today, had a quite a shattering episode in her life about 10, I think maybe 12 years back. And in this episode, I talked to her about what it was like losing her husband, in like literally not even overnight. Like you listen to it and you'll hear it from her, and just the idea of how do you deal with death, with loss, with grief, and in general, how do we as a society look at dying and the process of, I wouldn't say coping, but many times we emphasize on the rituals after someone passes on, but what is it really like, and how are we expected to behave versus what do we really need to do, and the idea of honoring a person's memory and how important that is, and to respect your feelings for that person, for the kind of relationship within yourself and that person. And I think more importantly, I mean, why do we kind of tell people to move on and tell people that, you know, things will be okay? And is there a way in which you can do it differently? And there's a way in which you can celebrate this idea of a person and continue to have them in your life, but move on with relationships that might come along. So Kelley's written a book kind of documenting her story, her experiences, her recovery, her journey of grief, her journey of helping and connecting with other people who've experienced similar situations in their life. And I think it's I found it really, um, how do I put it? I think I found it really profound. I think it was an eye opener in many ways. Very touching, and I think it's something that we all need to kind of think about without panicking and having this mortal fear of our existence, and kind of the moment we think about it, try to avoid it and try to avoid thinking about it. And I'm really happy that Kelley took the time to talk to me about her story, about her ex-husband, about her present husband, and how that um, development took place in her life. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of you listening, I'm sure all of us have lost someone, and I'm sure a lot of you listening might be able to make sense of a loss that you experienced by listening to what Kelley has to say. And of course, you can check out her talk on TEDx, which again is about loss and losing somebody you love, and her book, which is My Husband Is Not a Rainbow. You can check that out as well. And yeah, before I continue rambling on, let's get into the conversation with Kelley Lynn. And as always, I appreciate you tuning into this podcast every week and listening. Till next episode, goodbye, God bless, and take care of yourselves. Cheers. Kelley Lynn, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining me.
You are very welcome. I just woke up.
Well, I hope I have. I hope I don't bore you to sleep, back to sleep. Well, it's nice to have a fellow comedian, and I would
Yeah.
like to say fellow author, but I'm not there yet because I try to write, but I just can't, and I've made peace with that. But
It's difficult. It took me almost 5 years to write my book. It takes a long time to sort of piece it all together. It's not easy.
And I want to ask you that, right? Because as a comedian, you kind of also have the process of writing and then translating the written word into spoken word. And of course, you have the elements of performance and timing, etc. And you have the element of a live crowd. When you are telling a story, of course, the story being one aspect, but also the telling of, which is so important. How how do you hold that thought? Because in comedy sometimes what I feel is that thought knits the entire piece together, whether it's a 1 hour show or a 20-minute show. It's this underlying feeling that drives you through the material. And how do you retain that sense while writing a book? Because it took you 5 years, and it wasn't every day for 5 years. I'm sure you had moments where you had to reflect and you
Right.
had to take a break. So how do you hold that, for lack of a better word, that feeling through the book or through the piece?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it is not easy is the short answer. The longer answer is that people write differently, and some people I think write when they write, whether it's comedy or a book or an article or anything, I think they can sit down and like say, "Oh, from at 5 o'clock today, I'm going to write and I'm going to be creative." I
Ah,
cannot do that. I'm not that person. I
yeah,
can't give myself a time and say I'm going to write. I have to write when I feel creative. And sometimes that's at 3 in the morning. And sometimes that's me waking up in the middle of the night and going, oh, I have a thought. And then I write it down. And then
mm,
I'm furiously typing at my computer for the next 2 hours. And it was sort of pieced together that way, just in bits and pieces of when I feel it. And so
mm,
when I feel it, that mood, you know what I'm talking about as a comic yourself, that mood that you get where you just feel something in there that needs to come out. And
yeah,
anytime that would happen, I would just sit down and start furiously writing. And if I was out or if I was at work or something, I had a notebook with me or a little, I would just record it in my phone and I would just say it into the phone. And then
yeah,
later I would come home and write it. Um, so it was a lot of that for
right.
a few years.
That note taking, or at least just recording that one thought or putting it in your notes, it's great. But I remember once, so I used to just say, I'll wake up in the morning and remember it, and I more often than not didn't remember it, right? But I
Right.
remember once it was a few drinks down, and I woke up with this idea, and I said, I just put this point down. It sounds really funny, so I just opened my phone, put dictate, and next morning I see this note which goes, "Wet dreams and horse riding." I'm like, what were you thinking? I had
You're like, what
absolutely
does that mean?
yeah. So now I spend more time trying to figure out if I have some mental health issues, because clearly,
Right.
if you have horses in your wet dreams.
Yeah.
So
And then you
yeah,
spend 20 minutes going, well, what does that even mean?
yeah, absolutely. So I kind of spend a little bit more time awake, saying, okay, put a few more points to not
Yeah.
startle the sober Sandeep.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
But God, it's yeah. So
It's kind of like when you put something in a certain place so you won't forget where it is, and then you forget where it is.
yeah, or yeah, it's like you heard stories, right? People looking for their back in the day when you had landlines, you had the cordless phone or the remote, and suddenly it's in the fridge, and people are like, "What was it doing there?" Right?
Right.
But yeah, it happens. I think it's a strange idea, and I was telling you before we started recording, I've been reading this book, and people who've listened to this podcast will probably be wondering why I've taken so long to finish it. But it's one of those books which each passage kind of makes you think for quite a few days. And this morning, I was reading the book by Osho, and it's called Take It Easy. It's more of a lecture and an interpretation of these Zen passages. And that he was talking about the masculine and the feminine, and how the masculine is more insanity, and that's why the feminine, which brings more sanity, and how they both complement each other. And that's something, the reason I introduced that is because as an artist, in some sense, we need to mesh both, right? Because if we're outlandishly insane with our ideas, but we can't kind of rein them in with the context of managing it well. It doesn't, because you hear of some of the greatest comedians who are unknown because they just can't manage themselves. They can't book
Yeah.
themselves shows. They can't even sort of work in the realm of the entertainment business. And some people who are just mediocre, but they're so good when it comes to the organization, the business side of things. So I found that very interesting, how we all have each of that within us. But for you working in this space, because I want to go back to that time in your life, which of course is, I'm sorry for your loss, and
Thank you.
it's been I don't want to put words which, kind of to suppose what you went through, but can you talk me through, um, the book you wrote about, and why, and what led you, what experiences in your life led you to that point?
Sure, sure. So I was a comedian and an actor, and had like the basic, struggling actor lifestyle going on
Mm-hmm.
in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
um, back in the late 90s, so quite a
Mm-hmm.
long time ago.
Uh-huh.
And I was living that life, and I was teaching at Adelphi University in New York, and I was
Mm-hmm.
teaching as a professor for acting and stand-up comedy courses and writing courses and different things like that. So I was kind of living that life. And while I was there, I met this man, I was dating, and I met a man online, which was not what people did back then. So it was
Yeah.
not like a dating site. It was just a music chat room is what it was. And so you'd go into this
Interesting.
chat room and you would type song lyrics and 1980s song lyrics. And then you'd have to identify, oh, that's, this song by Men Without Hats or whatever.
Right. Right.
And and you'd guess the song lyrics. So one night I went in there in New York, and there was this guy in there from Florida. And
Mm-hmm.
we were the only two people in there. And usually there was 40 or 50 people in there playing this game. And, we were like, is it something we said? What's happening? Why are we the only two in here?
Yeah.
And we ended up having a 5-hour conversation. That 5-hour conversation turned into 3 years of us talking almost every night, online or on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
before we met in person.
Mm-hmm.
And then we met in person, and then we fell in love. And he moved to New York to be with me and start a life with me. And we were married 4.5 years, and we
Mm-hmm.
were very happy, and two struggling people.
Right.
And he was a paramedic, so he was
Okay.
not in the arts, but he loved being a part of that world with me. And he'd come over and tell a joke with me and be like, "Can you put that in your act? Can you put that in your act? That's funny, right?" So
Yeah.
he was a really funny person, and just a kind-hearted person, just an amazing kind-hearted person. very healthy as far as we knew. And one ordinary Wednesday, he got up and went to his volunteer job. He was off work that day, so he was not on the ambulance. And he got up to go to his volunteer job. He did a lot of work with rescue cats and dogs. He loved animals. And they found him collapsed on the floor about an hour later after he got there. And he had a massive heart attack and he died pretty instantly. They rushed him to the hospital, but it was, too late. And he was 46 years old. I was 39. And so I became widowed at 39 very, very suddenly. And I was not prepared. To say I was shocked was the understatement of life. I was expecting to spend my entire life with this person and grow old together and all of that, all of those things you expect when you marry someone. And hope. And my entire world changed. And so one of the things that happened was I took my comedy and my writing, which I had already done my whole life, and I used that to kind of get through the most difficult time in my life, and I started writing about it and I started getting on stage and talking about it and making jokes about, all the absurd things that happen to you when your spouse dies. And I found a community. I found a tribe of other widowed people who were going through the same thing and who had also lost a spouse or a partner, in their 30s, in their 20s, in their 40s, and it really, really got me through the worst time of my life to have that community, and to be creative and use my creativity to talk about it and to be honest about it, about how hard it is, because nobody tells you how brutally hard it is to get through something like that and how long the grief really does last. And it doesn't really ever go away. It kind of shifts and changes over the years. And it's way better now. It's been 11 years now, but it's always a part of my life. And so one of the things I did is I wrote a book called My Husband Is Not a Rainbow. And that's basically a book about all of that, that whole, I call it a tsunami, not a journey. I hate the word journey. To me, journey is like a mediocre 80s band and and not something that describes grief. So I call it the grief tsunami, because it's more like that to me. It just comes crashing into your life uninvited and breaks all the windows and puts all of your emotions and feelings on the floor, and you've got to clean it up for the next decade. And you've got to figure that out.
This idea that I think a lot of us are conditioned, especially now with the post-pandemic era, if you want to call it, we're conditioned to kind of look at our own mortality, right? Because a lot of people we knew lost their lives, and a lot of them, yes, were susceptible, but a lot of them were also healthy. And now you hear of young people suddenly getting heart attacks. But of course, when it happened for you, you didn't live in a time of a pandemic. So there's a difference, right? When you think of it, you're anticipating it and nothing happens. But then when you're not thinking about it and you're planning for this long life with the person you love, and suddenly it just takes you out of left, just unexpected and such a shattering loss. I get the idea, right, that you used comedy, or someone would use words or lyrics or music, and these are proven to be some kind of balm to at least not bottle up those feelings. And I've spoken to a couple of people, like a friend who lost his mother to cancer, and he said the same thing. He said, I just went and spoke about it on stage. It was raw, it was hard, but not so much a but there is a but, clearly, a second one. I don't know why I said but. It's a but, yeah. What is that? I mean, did you ever feel you're doing injustice to him while talking about it? Because I don't come from a place of criticism. I come from a place of, when you're talking about something so painful, do you feel that you can't, or let me phrase it this way, do you feel the joke itself limits the emotion behind what you're trying to say, because you have to get the laugh, or you have to get, and sadly today we live in a victim glorifying thing where people will clap because you're the victim, that you went through this
Right.
loss. So how much were you bound by the medium itself?
So that's a great question. You ask good questions. You're
Thank
good
you.
at this.
Yeah,
But
I hope so, because
no,
what
for
I've
real,
noticed,
because
and what I notice sometimes
usually
I ask
people ask such
questions,
boring questions.
but my wife's like, "Can you let them finish answering the question?" But I end up asking the next one. So I appreciate the
You're like
compliment.
me. Yeah, you get too many thoughts in your head at once and you just want to get them all out. You're like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, but
that's a
I've got
good
a little
question.
better since episode 1. I'm listening a little bit more. So
So it is a very good question. And um, so the answer is that when I do this comedy, I don't do it everywhere for that reason. I do it in specific places and situations where most of the time the audience is also widowed, or they are also going through a loss, or like I wouldn't go into a comedy club in New York City and talk about my dead husband for 20 minutes because it doesn't make sense. Those people are there to have a few drinks, have a good time. They don't want to hear about how my husband died. They don't want to feel bad for me. They don't want that. And I've found that by trying it a few times in those places, and it just didn't go well. I felt like they were feeling bad for me instead of laughing. And so they were just kind of staring at me and drinking their beer, and they were like, yeah, I think we're going to leave early.
yeah, yeah,
This woman's up here talking about her dead husband, and this is really awkward. But when I do the comedy in front of other widowed people, the comedy is not about how my husband died. That's not funny. What's funny is what happens afterwards. All the
yeah,
comments people make to you when you lose somebody, he's in a better place. It's God's plan. Like all that stuff is what I make fun of.
yeah,
And then all of the red tape issues that you have to go through when you lose a spouse, calling phone companies and changing your phone plan and having them tell you that, they need to speak to your husband. Well, he's dead. You can't talk to him. I'm sorry. Things like that are where the comedy comes from. So I never ever felt like I was compromising myself to get the laugh, because the laughs were so genuine in those audiences, and those are my people, and that's where I do that comedy. When I go into a comedy club, I do what I call my normal comedy, my
yeah,
observational humor, everyday humor, that type of stuff. I just do more of the other stuff because it's more meaningful to me now in my
yeah,
life after loss. I do a lot of the comedy where I'm talking to other people going through loss, or people who have been through trauma, people who have been through grief. So it's
yeah.
kind of like a comedic presentation more than a
Got it.
stand-up comedy act.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So you speak about this thing of post-death, a lot of the red tape stuff, right? I remember listening to a bit by Doug Stanhope, which was so brilliantly put together about how, he lost his mum, and how the last few days he brought her home, and his wife, or I think his girlfriend and him, were taking care of her. And then after she passed away, they didn't shut down her credit card, and then they kept using it. And he said, "Ma, thanks, because you kept paying even after you weren't there." And I mean, I'm doing injustice to the delivery, but he
Right.
just does it so well. And that the reason I mentioned that is because we spoke before we started recording about, without drawing a parallel, but kind of without even trying to say we had a shared experience, but loss, without, in this sense, in my case, it was grief is another thing which we'll talk about. But this idea of loss with, when I talk about, when I started talking about my visual impairment, or how I lost my eyesight when I was a young kid on stage, the initial thing was first unbelievable. People were like, not unbelievable from my end, but they didn't believe that I couldn't see, right? They thought it's a thing I'm doing to get pity. Or when they did start believing me, I had to like rush through to the stuff I wanted to say to get to, like, oh, I went on a blind date, some silly stuff like that, right?
Right.
But when you do it amongst people with, say, you do it at a conference for disabled people, they all have
Yep.
some sense of the shared story, right? Like someone's asked a guy in
Right.
a wheelchair, like, oh, would you like to take the steps or the lift? And so I think that you're able to drill deeper into the feelings that you really
Yes.
want to share, as opposed to like the top 5 jokes about blindness, or because and why is that? Why are we so okay? I'm not taking away from the audience, because you're right, some people just want to come and have a few drinks, but talking
Yeah.
about these things, everyone is going to go through loss at some point. Everyone is going to, I mean, the only thing that is assured in life is death, right? For everyone. Some of us will lose our lives, but someone will lose a partner. But let's let's specifically talk about the idea of losing someone, right? It is going to
Yes.
happen. Um,
Yep.
and I'm not saying we can be prepared for it because it's going to hurt damn bad, irrespective of being prepared or not. But when you say you speak about the post-death instances, right, which are bureaucratic in nature, it could be, but I'm sure you have other things that you would like to talk about, right? Not at the cost of making fun of your husband passing away, but of the feelings, right? Like sitting there and just
Yeah.
unable to face life, or
Yep.
this mortal fear of your own. Because a lot of times when someone in my family's passed away, I'm just scared. Oh shit, it's going to pass off and it's going to rub off on me. I'm going to go tomorrow. There's this absolute
Yep.
fear of your own mortality. But why can't we talk
And I do
about these
talk
things?
about those things. I do talk
Right.
about those things with my widowed tribe because it's
Yeah.
so comfortable and they've felt that too. I one of the things I talk about is exactly that, how, when you become widowed, it's like you become contagious. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to be around you because they think, oh crap, that can happen to me too. My husband might
Mm.
die if I stay around her, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden everybody's uninviting you to things. They don't want to be around you. It's very uncomfortable for people it's like you become this cloud of death, like
Mm.
when Pigpen walks by from Charlie Brown and he's got that cloud of dust behind him, we have the cloud of death behind us
Right.
and nobody wants to be around. And so I do talk about the feelings, the emotions, all the brutally honest stuff
Mm.
of widowhood and of grief and death and loss. And those people in that audience don't run away from that. They laugh and they cry at the same time. And, for some of them, it's, they'll come up to me after the show and they'll say, that's the first time I've laughed since my wife was diagnosed with cancer. That's the first time I've laughed since my husband died, or I didn't think I could ever laugh again. And so it's a really incredible experience.
Do you think, Kelly, we are conditioned in society why we constantly live fearing death, right? Many of us, because
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to avoid at any cost. But in one sense, we have these rituals to honor the dead. But
Yeah.
I don't know what the thought is. But do you feel in some sense, while all that is done, okay, we have, you know, a mourning period. We kind of do our due diligence when it comes to paying respects. But do you think that the moment that time is over, we kind of are conditioned to disrespect death? Not disrespect death, but disrespect the aftermath of death in some way. I don't know if
I
that's.
do.
Mm,
I
um,
totally get what you're asking. And yes, I think that as a society, we really stink at dealing with death and grief and loss. As a society, we are horrible with, we've been conditioned to think that those rituals, the funeral, the whatever you do after the death and in the immediate aftermath of the death, um, that you do that thing and then that's it, you move on after that, and that is so untrue. It is so unhealthy and it is so wrong on so many levels, and we make people think that there's something wrong with them because they want to continue to have a connection to the person they lost and they want to continue to love that person. It's different, it's a different form of love. Like my husband is that died is no longer my husband, but I'm connected to him forever. I was his wife, now I'm his widow. That connects me to him forever. And he's still a part of my life in my mind. I have moved forward in my life. I'm remarried. It's 11 years later. I am remarried and I'm happy again. However, I still have sadness. I still have grief. I still miss him. I'll always miss him. And he's a part of my life. I still talk to him, in my head, and he's like my teammate now. He's like a somebody that's on my side, and he was just such a great person, and he's part of what made me the person I am today, so that I could love again. So that's
mm,
kind of how I see it, is that it's all connected. And if we take the losses that we have with us and bring them forward into our life forward, it can actually help us to create a better life for ourselves and to use that love we had from that person to fuel more love. But the way
Yeah.
society makes us having, wanting to see it as, oh, let that go. That's part of your past. Move on from that, as if we should be ashamed of loving
Yeah.
somebody that died. And I think that's awful.
And that's what I was thinking, right? Because we are so bound by the material body and the material existence of that person, the name or the job they held or the role they had in
Right.
our lives, right? Whether it's father, son, mother, wife, husband. Um, and it's almost like, oh, you didn't go for the funeral, you disrespected their memory. But I think that's so final, right? That you have 13 days
Yeah.
in Indian custom, or the you have to go for the funeral and the burial and the wake or whatever the practice is and whatever the faith. But this is what I think, right? Because what you just said makes so much sense, that we're so conditioned that when that body is no longer there, the person's gone. But
Right.
what if we're told, or rather, what if we believe in the idea that the person, firstly, even when they're alive, I mean, just because I live, say I live away from whoever it is I lived away from my parents for just 5 years doing university. Now, technically, they're not physically with me, and they're not lost, but there's a sense I'll meet them for the holidays, right? But
Yep.
if it's a similar kind of thing, I feel, because if we're kind of told that the bond doesn't have to be physically holding the hand. Of course, it's great to hold your partner. It's definitely to show love and share love in that way. But there are so many more deeper layers that continue to exist after the physical is no more, right?
Yes. Yes. There's so many more layers, and it's just one more way that we're all connected, right? That we are all going to go through loss. I mean, if you love human beings die, and we're going to go through losses, all of us, whether it's brothers, sisters, parents, for best friends, spouses. I mean, so many people in our lives as we get older are going to die,
Yeah.
and we are going to die. And so I think society is just so conditioned to not really talk about that. And like you said, they focus on the rituals of death. They focus on the funeral. They focus on the respecting the dead and those kind of things. But what about respecting the people that are left behind? What about respecting that widow that's left behind, or that son or daughter that's left behind when their parent dies, or that parent that's left behind when their small child dies or their baby dies, things like that are just horrific to go through. And then you have friends and family turning their back on you and ignoring you after those funerals because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to deal with you. And they've been conditioned to think, I've done my duty. I went to the funeral. I sent
Yeah.
flowers. Now I'm done.
I feel the
And so
work needs to
now you
start
have a
right
bunch of,
after the ritual. Like, you need to start
yeah,
doing more. I mean, give them some time off for like 15, 20 days after the death, and then start calling every week, or that's when the support is most needed, right?
yeah, just check in, and just don't ignore the person and leave them feeling so alone, because when you lose somebody like that, you already feel so isolated and
Yeah.
so alone and so like nobody else could possibly know this pain. And you
Yeah.
don't have to do anything big. You just have to be there and not abandon the person. Just be there. But so many people don't do that. They really, because they don't know how. They just want to fix it and want to make
Mm.
it better, and you can't make it better. It's not possible. Something horrible has happened in this person's life, and they just need to go through it and process it. But have people there, and knowing that people are there to just sit with them in their pain, or to just stop by and bring some food over, or take them out for lunch, or things like that. But not a week after the person died, but continue doing it for years after, months and years, and keep asking, how are you doing? How are you really doing?
Now, I want to
And
understand, because the physical thing is very real, like not hearing the person's voice, not smelling them, not holding them, not,
yeah,
but did you ever feel, and this is something which I don't know if it's a point that is valid, but I feel you have this moment where the physical stops to hurt as much, not having that person wake up in the morning next to you. Of course, it's never going to stop hurting entirely, but it it almost like it goes the deeper connection starts taking over more, and that sort of
Yeah.
helps soothe the physical pain. Is that a valid point?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that that isn't so much a moment where that happens. At least it wasn't for me. It's kind of a lot of little moments where that
Mm,
happens, that where that shift takes place over time and over doing the hard grief work. I mean, myself, I had a grief counselor for about 3 years after the loss. Every Monday I saw a grief counselor. I did a lot of writing. I did a lot of comedy. Writing the book was very therapeutic. Meeting other widowed people was very therapeutic and still is. I have a lot of widowed friends in my life now. Um, and just talking about it to anyone who would listen, really. And so, yeah, after some time of doing that, and continuing to live your life and find new things that, that you want to do with your life, because the question becomes, okay, what do I do now? How do I live this life now without him, but also with him? Because I
mm,
want to live in a life where I can have him as still part of my life and still continue forward. It's not one or the other.
yeah.
Um, so it does become less about missing the physical person and finding ways to change the connection that you have with them. So it took me a long time through grief counseling to kind of see my husband Don as not my husband, not a husband and wife relationship, but more of like a different connection. Like, this is a different connection now. I can no longer be his wife, but I'm connected to him forever. And that, like, to feel that connection change took a lot of time. Um, but once that happened, I did feel more of a sense of peace and way more of a sense of, okay, I can live this way because he's not gone. He's gone physically. He's not my partner anymore, but he's not gone from my life. He'll never be gone from my life. And that made me feel like it was almost like a big sigh of relief. Like, oh, okay, he's not really gone. Like, and if I can find ways to keep him in my life, and help other people through loss and help them know that they can do that too. And so their person won't be gone, really. Um, it's so helpful. It's so helpful. And so if society could learn that somehow, that's the message I'm always trying to spread, because I just think it's so much easier to live with losses if we can do that. And if we're allowed to do that and not judged for it.
It's a remarkable sense of. I haven't been through what you have, so I don't want to put any words that sound patronizing, but it how is this experience, losing someone so dear to you, how has that changed your relationship to death?
Man, you have good questions. They're so deep.
I think my parents put that in my name unintentionally.
Right. Were you born that way? Were you just born a
No,
deep person that has all these questions in your head? I love it.
yeah, I don't know if they're profound, but I, I'm terrified of these things coming to reality, and I just want to know,
Yeah.
because I mean, why do we, you know, kind of speculate when it's? I think a person who's been through it and their experience is the most powerful, one of the most powerful resources out there. So, sorry, I'm just asking you because you feel these things, and you, as opposed to you use words to hypothesize, right? You've actually been through
Right.
this. I want to get it from your life, right? Because when you're so scared of this thing, and we're all just trying to avoid thinking about death, and we're working 100
Yeah.
hour shifts, and next thing you know, we are saved up all this money to live healthily, and we can't because we're unhealthy wrecks, and we're stressed and we're
Yeah.
anxious. And but if from a young age, if we can look at death as a thing which is inevitable and accept it, it might just make life a little easier and more enjoyable to live, right? So that's why I wanted to find out what your approach to looking at death is, and rather how it's changed since that profound loss in your life.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a really, really good concept and a great question. It's changed in a few ways. So Death has always kind of terrified me, from when I was a little kid. It's just always been this looming thing that's
Mhm.
terrified me. And part of the reason it terrified me was because I didn't really have um, the sense that something happens afterwards.
Mhm.
I didn't really know. And I'm not really a religious person. I'm more of a spiritual person.
Mhm.
So I didn't really believe in heaven, hell, that kind of thing. And so I just kind of was thinking, does nothing happen after we die? Do we just go nowhere and we're just nothing? And the idea of that terrified me, like
Yeah.
that you're here one day and then you're just gone. And so after Dawn's death, and again, this took some time. It wasn't like all of a sudden I felt this differently, but
Yeah.
it took a lot of talking through it and a lot of time and a lot of just kind of thinking about it and living my life differently. Um, Once I started to feel that connection with him, with, this person that is so dear to me that died suddenly, and I could still feel him here with me in so many different ways. Feel him cheering me on, feel him, just in so many different ways. Um, then I started to see death a little differently. Like, well, maybe there is something more when we die. Maybe it's not just nothing. Maybe you're not just, absolutely nothing when you die, but maybe your soul lives on and maybe your spirit lives on through stories that people tell, the people that are left behind, through memories, through um, their actions and the ways that they honor you, through the relationships they make because they met you, and to so many ways that everybody changes everybody else's life when they're here on earth, but they can continue to change and alter someone's life after their death, you know? And so Dawn has changed my life in so many ways and helped me learn so many things about life and death, both in his time here and now because of
Mm.
his death, that um, it's really changed everything and in a good way. I mean, I feel like I'm a much better person in so many ways because I knew him and because of his kindness. I kind of try and take some of my favorite traits of his and put them in my own life, and be more like he was. He was a very patient person, so I try to be more patient. Doesn't always work, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I I do try.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm less terrified now of death. I still don't want to die. I mean, I'm kind of, scared to go there and all that. But
Yeah.
it's definitely changed in my mind because I think, well, maybe when I die, you know, hopefully I've left behind this message of hope that we're all connected and that, when I die, please talk about me. Please
Yeah.
don't be ashamed to talk about me and to, reach out to my family, and things like that. And hopefully I've made a difference in a big way and in small ways. And I just think that it's so much less terrifying after you can sit with it for a little while and kind of make some sense of it, you
Just the
know?
words you use now to represent what you want people to identify with your life, it's very humble because you didn't say, I want them to celebrate me or honor me or, set up something in my memory, but it was more the reality of it, like reach out to my family, kind of
Yeah.
respect some of the messages I put out there. And that is something that I think is so doable as opposed to build a huge statue in my honor, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
but I find that very very sort of you know humble and nice to hear because in a society where everyone wants to be celebrated with either being called a star or a celebrity or
Yeah.
an icon or whatever the word in that field may be, and everyone else aspiring to do that with the immense power of the internet.
Right.
You, someone like you who's been through quite a life changing experience over the past 10, 12 years. Um, and as a result, now you stand in a I would say, in a place many people who have experienced loss have not come to because of various reasons, because of denial, because of avoidance, because of maybe various things which
Sure.
is their own journey or their own way of coping. You're a grief counselor now. You help other people who go through this. Uh, what do you see shaping out in our generation and the generations to come when it comes to grief, or more importantly, facing adversity and the idea of resilience?
Yeah, I see things getting better. It's been a slow movement in that direction, but I really feel like society is getting better at talking about grief, at talking about loss, at letting people speak about it. There's a lot more shows on television about grief, about loss. There's a lot more movies made about widowed people and about people that lose a child or a parent or a sibling. There's just more information. There's more websites. There's more organizations. There's more nonprofits. All these things, and there's the internet, that didn't exist, many decades ago.
Yeah.
There's so many more places of support. There's so many more better messages about death and loss. And there's just more of an open-mindedness about it. We still have a long way to go, but it's getting better. And that's what I see. The messages are getting better that are coming out into society. So I feel like the people coming into the next generations going forward are going to have a lot more tools to deal with and a lot more better skills when they're grieving and when they're going through loss, and they'll feel a lot less alone, which is so important and so great.
It's encouraging, right?
Yeah, it is encouraging because it's, even just 11 years ago when I lost my husband, all of what's available today was not available then. And there was some available then, but there's so much more now, just even in the past 5 years.
Mm. I want to ask you one thing before we wind up for today. You're, I'm so happy that you're remarried and your husband and you have a new life you're sharing. But how is
Yeah.
it for him? Because it
Yeah.
can't always be. It's a twofold thing. One is to be there for you, of course, because you've been through this pretty
Yeah.
incredible, life-changing experience of loss and grief. But now, I mean, I'm going to say this out the way, and sorry if it sounds a bit um, inconsiderate, but
Yeah.
it's almost like he has to take on this role of your. I mean, of course, as your friend and your partner and the person you love. But there's this thing that I don't know his background. Sorry, but I'm just going to ask the question as you as an example, but not specifically maybe to you. But so when someone is lost someone and they're getting remarried, it's almost like he definitely has helped you, right? Come to where you are. With this
Sure.
new way of looking at this chapter in your life. But what is okay? I'm going all over the place, but I don't have that right. For once, I don't have a good question, Kelley. I'm sorry, but it's more an idea of how does someone who is marrying a person who's widowed approach the situation?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I think first of all, it takes a certain type of person
Mm,
to love a widowed person. I really do feel that way because
okay.
I did not start dating until 5 years after my husband's death. It took me that long to even be interested in dating, to the idea of dating, to the concept of someone else. I wasn't interested for the first 5 years. I just had too much to go through. And if you would have asked me then, I would have said, no way, no way in double H. I don't know if you can swear on the show,
Oh,
but
of course. No, of course. Yeah.
no way in
But
hell that I'm going to be, in love again with anybody else. Um, I would have never believed it.
yeah.
But things change and they shift, and I got lonely. Around year 5, I was like, this sucks. Am I going to have to be alone forever? I'm only in my 40s, and I don't know what I want to do here.
Mm,
And so I started to go on the dating sites and all that stuff. And I met a lot of people that could not deal with the fact that I was a widow. They just couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it emotionally. They couldn't handle it mentally. They felt like I should move on, because that's what society tells them.
Yeah.
And they, aren't you over this yet? And, you talk about him a lot and then stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people out there that cannot handle it. And it needs to be a specific type of person. Maybe somebody who's been through a lot of loss themselves. And so my husband, Nick, has been through a lot of loss himself. He lost both parents pretty young. He lost a sibling pretty young. And so he's been through a lot of loss himself. And he has always been very, very understanding of me being widowed and my involvement in the widowed community. And I think he just gets it. He understands that it's a huge part of who I am, and that, the love Dawn and I shared is what brought me to him. It's part, if I wasn't who I became because of that loss and that love, I wouldn't be able to love him. So he sees it the same way I see it, in a way that it's all kind of connected.
That's a very unique way which very few people can respect someone for, right? Because there's an automatic sense of jealousy going, come on, you're giving more importance to someone who's not around. Like, I'm here now, give me the love, kind of thing. But what your husband is doing is...
But he sees it as more of, he's dead. He says this all the time. He's like, he's dead. He's no threat to me. He's dead. He's not coming back, So,
see, now that's funny in a very heartfelt way, but that would be perceived as offensive in today's very sort of fluffy society, right? But that makes so much sense, because the bond you share is as a result of his losses and your losses and the experience that you've gone through to overcome, not overcome, but gone through to get to where you are. And that is something which is so much more on a level that a person who would get offended by that line will never understand, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly why that type of comedy, it works so well with, other widowed people. They crack up at that, and there's this conference that I attend at, one of the places I present at. It's called Camp Widow. And it's put on by, I know, and that's funny too, right? Camp Widow, it sounds horrible.
Right.
But it's this amazing kind of like a retreat where there's all kinds of presentations and courses and things about grief. And it's a 3-day weekend in different parts of the country, held a few times a year. And that's where I present. And I do like a 90-minute comedic presentation about grief and loss there. And he comes with me because they welcome partners. Okay. So he comes with me once a year to Tampa, Florida, to do this presentation. And he's got up himself and told some jokes as my partner. And the people there love it. They crack up because it's so real. It's so brutally honest. And a lot of people that are there that are widowed have also been repartnered. So it's really an amazing thing when you can be that honest about it and about how weird it is, and because it is weird. It's very strange to be a widowed person who's remarried, and there's a lot of funny situations where I'm talking about my husband, and one of my widowed friends will say, the dead one or the alive one? It's like that kind of brutal humor that we have. Yeah. And it's dark, it's like dark humor that I think you gain when you have been through something tragic,
And it sounds like, there are these people in comedy especially who want to be saying things because they call themselves dark humor, I talk about dark material. And they do it without the experience, right? They'll crack a rape joke, or they'll crack some joke which they know is the set of things in today's society which will get the shock value. But it's so unfunny because it's not an experience.
It's not real.
It's not real. And this, even though it may not be the punchiest joke, but it is funny because that person has the license to say it because they've come to where they are after experiencing what they have.
Exactly.
And that's why I want to extend that to
say it.
Yeah, and that's something which I feel we need more of, as opposed to saying you can't talk about rape in comedy, you can't talk about abuse. I feel if you've been through it, if you can go through life after something so horrific, something so life-changing, and you have the right to talk about it, no one should shut you up. But if someone's going and doing it because they want to stand out and say, you know what, I'm a commentator, and we have these pricks in stand-up who are just waving this flag going, I stand for all people are abused, and everyone's like lauding them because he has the balls to talk about. I'm like, but it's such a bad job because then it's not real, it's not funny,
Right.
and it's just, what's the word they use now? Virtue signaling, right? Which everyone's talking about. But what you've been through, and you said the ladies who are at this conference, if you can go through it and you can shoulder that pain and you can wear that pain, get to where you are in life, and you have every right to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel totally the same way about comedy, especially. And, I've done some comedy teaching and instructing and things like that. And that's one of the number one things I have always told my students, even before I went through this loss. I always told my students, whenever you're writing a joke, ask yourself, and it seems like a controversial joke or topic, or it's about race, or it's about, something like that, where you feel like it's controversial. Ask yourself, why am I writing the joke? Don't ask
Yeah.
yourself, is it offensive? But why do I want to say it?
Yeah.
Why do you want to say it? And tell me why you want to say it. And,
Yeah.
if that's their reason because it's shocking, well, then don't say it. That's
Yeah.
not a good reason.
Stand
If
by
you
it
actually
when
have
the fire
something to
hits
say,
you. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, if it's true and honest and you actually have something to say and you actually feel this way, let's break that down and talk about that and find a way to make that fun.
And most people can't, and most people who haven't got the experience but who get the fame overnight aren't able to stand by their jokes. They kind of
Right.
have an apology ready, or they're like, "Oh, I'm cancelled." And I don't know.
Right.
I don't think it's heading to a good place for stand up, because it's more of these people than people who are genuinely funny and genuinely talking about experiences that they want to share, and they want to say shit that they want to say, as opposed to things that
Yeah.
want to be heard and the right kind of thing. So the woke people celebrate you, or the conservative celebrate. I'm like, why can't just a joke be a joke and stand by it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and you have all these things that are so fast and quick, like TikTok and all this stuff now, where Instagram and TikTok, where you have to like get the joke done in like 4 seconds or 14 seconds,
Yeah,
and it's so
that's the
I
joke.
just can't stand it. Yeah, I just can't stand it. It's like it's too little of a space and a time frame to get anything of value in there,
Absolutely,
and
I'm with you on
it's
that.
really hard. Yeah, that's why I love this, because this format that you're doing, because it's more long form, and I love that. I love words. I love to talk. I love to break things down, and and have a real conversation. And there's, in so many ways, not enough of that today.
I love it too. I really think, that these things that we have spoken about, um, it is stories, right? It is what humanity has passed on. It's not
Yeah,
um to take away from the other developments we have, but the connection that goes beyond short form content is where, I don't know you, I've never met you till an hour back, but these words we've shared has gone beyond words, right? It's things that
yeah,
I would probably not talk to many people about who I know,
right.
because the connection is not about um, you and I happen to be in a similar space of work, but besides that, whatever has shaped your life, the experiences that have been in yours and mine are so different. But I feel this is what it means to be one of the things that is so profoundly human, right? Finding the ability to talk to someone who's so different from you, and then share ideas and thoughts and experiences and emotions that is what makes you human, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the fact that you can just have a conversation like this when you don't know the person, but
Yeah.
so quickly you can just have a natural, organic conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's such a great thing. It's such a great thing to have those experiences.
No, it's been absolutely a pleasure talking to you, Kelly. I think what you're doing to help other people who've been through similar events in their life, but I think more importantly, and not saying this lightly, is
Yeah.
changing the narrative around how a person who's died, who was so important to you, can actually be someone who can also lead you to a place in your life which you might have never got to.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to word it. And that's a great way to that's a great message to send, because that's what it is. It's it doesn't negate the fact that it's still a tragic, horrible, awful loss, and it's incredibly painful. However, it can also evolve you as a person and lead you to somewhere, like you said, that you may have never gone.
Yeah, no, it's
You know,
it's
horrible
a,
things change us. They
yeah,
change us as people. And I think that eventually it's up to us how it changes you. You know, something as deep as a loss. How does it change you? That's up to you. It's not up to us. You know, when someone dies, you know, we can't control that, but we can control how it changes us. Is it going to make us a bitter, angry person? Is it going to evolve us into something where we can help other people, or where we can, you know, change the trajectory of our life in some way and carry that person with us?
no, that's amazing. It's a lot more. I'm sure it's easier for me to say it with words, but you've actually done what you've said you've done, which is
Yeah.
so much more. And I salute you for that. And cheers to Don's memory. Cheers to you, and
Thank you.
cheers to Nick. And
Thank you. He'll appreciate that when he listens to this.
yeah, no, it's great. It's been a lovely time chatting with you, and I hope we can share a stage sometime.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, it'll be
Maybe a
fun.
Zoom show, since we're so far away from
Yeah,
each
maybe a
other.
Zoom show. Maybe I don't know. Maybe my wife and I, we might visit New York or the U.S.
Oh,
Who knows?
nice.
I mean, I have no clue what our plans are, but
Well, if you
let's.
do, please let me know. I'd love to meet you in person. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
that would be lovely. No, I think that should happen in the near future. And good luck with everything, and with your new material, and with
Thank
whatever
you.
projects you're working on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And this was a blast. And much like life, it went by way too fast.
Yeah, no, I think we should do this again. I think we should keep chatting
That'd be
once in a
great.
while. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, take care, Kelly. Appreciate it.
You too.